Hey, welcome to Wisdom Wednesday, also Ash Wednesday. So, as always, I am grateful for you being here, and I truly am blessed to have this time with you each Wednesday and talk about something again. Today, we'll be working on principles number 3 and 4 of Unity's 5 principles. Last week, we talked about um, the principle of God being everywhere and everything and through everything. We talked about how we are being as the expression of God, good in our own way, and I'll talk more about that as we review that. But today we want to talk about thoughts. And I thought that, the perfect part of principle 3, and let me just read the principle here. Human beings create their experience by the activities of their thinking. Everything in the manifest realm has its beginning in thought. And I thought, what better way than launching this talk on Ash Wednesday? So, for anyone who has been around the Unity Circle, when we talk about Lent, which is this season we're entering in starting Ash Wednesday, is the acronym pretty much we look at is let's eliminate negative thought. And it is with that thought pattern that we begin to release and renew. Also, make sure that you check out the videos on the book Release and Renew, which you can get at unity.org in their publication center. As well as I said, I will be doing that. I also did on Meditation Monday all the release and renew statements in one meditation that you can listen to over and over and over again to have that practice. So as always, I ask you to like, subscribe, share this video, as well as hit that bell so you will always be notified when a video drops. And for you guys that are out there that are watching the videos and giving me private comments, I definitely want to shout out and thank you guys. And again, share it out. It may not be you this week, but somebody may need the message. So today, principle number 3 is human beings create their experience by the activity of their thinking. Everything in the manifest realm has its beginning in thought. And when we talk about the manifest realm, we're talking about this outer world that we look at. One of the biblical verses that I like is from Matthew 16:19. Says, I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. It goes back to that thinking. So again, a quick review of the first 2 principles. We begin to see that we are living in an ocean of love and abundance in which we cannot fail. We are ever connected to the source of all things. We are extensions of that ultimate creator, and we can tap into that power of wisdom and guidance of divinity at any time. One of the things that changed my thought pattern when I learned of principle 3 was something I heard a long time ago. And again, we mention it here in the book, as well as I heard it with Wayne Dyer when I was listening to his CD, Manifesting Your Destiny, which isn't a book, but I got the audiobook. And on the audiobook, he described some verses that I had never heard as a Catholic. So one of those verses is actually John 14:12. It says, if we truly can do all the works that Jesus did and more than this, as he stated in John 14:12. So Jesus himself is looking at his apostles and saying, you can do all the works that I've done and even greater. And we know when we're talking about evolving thoughts, we talk about how today we may be able to do this, but tomorrow we can take this and grow it. So as expressions of what we may call the creator, we may call God, we may call source, why wouldn't we think that we can do the same thing with our own thoughts? And as I said before, everything we see, whether it's this table, the candle, the speaker, the tablet I'm using for my notes, so forth and so on, everything begins as an idea. And that idea usually comes from something even higher, an intuitive idea, a divine inspiration that says this is something that's needed. And then it passes through our subconscious, which is where it makes a difference. The Buddhists said 2,500 years ago, All that we are is a result of what we thought. If a man speaks or acts with evil thoughts, pain follows him. If a man speaks or acts with pure thoughts, happiness follows him, like a shadow that never leaves him. There's a story that was told to me many years ago, and I love the story. And it's about a man who's rocking on his porch, and that porch happens to be sitting on one of the busiest highways that enters into his city. So one morning he's sitting there, he's just rocking away, and the car pulls up and it says, "Hey, sir," and he's like, "Hey, how you doing?" He goes, "Yeah, we're new in town." He's like, "Great." And they ask, "Well, how are the people here?" He says, well, he looks at them. He says, "Well, how are the people over there?" He said, "Oh, we couldn't wait to get away from them. They were just nasty, always in your business, always doing stuff. We couldn't even trust them. We didn't know what to do, so we needed to move." And the man looked at them and said, "You'll find those people here." They drove off. A couple hours later, another car pulls up and says, "Hey, sir." He's like, "How you doing?" He's like, "We're new in town." He's like, "Great, welcome." And they ask again, "Well, how are the people here?" He says, "Well, how are the people over there?" He says, "Oh, we're going to miss them. They were lovely. They threw us a big party when we moved out. We're going to just miss them terribly. We can't wait to contact them and say how we're doing well here," so forth and so on. He says, "Good, because you'll find those same people here." And the story is basically telling you that it is your perspective. How do you see it? So if your thoughts are constantly on the negative, that's all you will produce, and that's all you will see. If you're constantly thinking more in the positive, or even when there are challenges, that you're able to move your thoughts from that immediate, disappointment to more of this is a lesson, you'll see the differences. It says for centuries, this spiritual law has been considered to be about thought. So from Proverbs 23:7, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he," to Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, which reintroduces the principles during the Great Depression that emphasized was on thoughts held in mind. We talk about that constantly. What is it you're constantly thinking about? And when we go back to the theory of energy, when we talk about metaphysics meeting quantum physics, we know that we're producing energy. So when our thought pattern is putting out energy in lack, putting out energy in anger, putting out energy in anything that serves us, it's going to bring more of that. You've heard me say this many times. Reverend Michael Bernard Beckwith of the Agape International Movement, and he said worry is nothing more than you attracting into your life what you didn't want in the first place. So think about that. When your mind is worrying about something that hasn't even happened, it is the stories that we create in our mind. We're creating a vibrational energy that's going out and is attracting to it what you're sending out. We create everything or attract. I use the word interchangeably from a higher consciousness. The hurdle is not that it only is to change our thoughts, but to actually to feel it as if its unwanted event has not happened, or conversely, to feel what we want rather than reacting to what is in the moment. If all the do's and don'ts of quantum possibilities are true and the emotions in the key is choosing reality, then the question is, how do we feel as if something has happened when the person next to us stares us squarely in the face and says it hasn't? For example, are we lying to ourselves if we say that a loved one is already healed, but we're standing over that person in the intensive care unit of St. Someone's Hospital? One of the things you want to think about here, and we will mention it later, is that we can only control the vibrational energy that we send out. See, one of the things, and I can tell you a couple of stories that fall into this realm, and I'll do that in a little bit, is I could want something for someone, but if that person doesn't want it for themselves, there's nothing I can do about it. I can help them see it right, but if that person doesn't want to see it for themselves and doesn't want to move their own thoughts and vibrations into the vibration of what they truly want, there's nothing we can do. Whether we talk about God or the universe or anything else outside of it, it does not understand English. It understands vibrational energy. And what comes back is what we think and what we create and what we feel. We must first acknowledge that we have the power to make the choice. So we're going to choose to either be on the side of lack or the side of positivity to send out that vibration. One of the quotes of Jesus, of course, is do not judge by appearance, but judge by right judgment. We talk about the power of judgment, the power of discernment, the power of wisdom is to see the situation as it is. There's no labeling, there's no nothing. This is the situation. Where do I go from here? We creating consciousness, most of us get the power. When we create consciousness, most of us get the process backwards. We look at what has already materialized, then form an opinion about whether we like it or not. Paying attention to what we don't want is usually only long enough to clarify what we do want, then creating an experience by shifting focus. So if we look at something we don't want in our lives, whether it's a bad relationship, whether it's a bad job, I'm already labeling it, something that we don't want. And we put our focus on that, what we don't want, but that's all we're focusing on. We continuously create into our lives what it is that we don't want. But when we look at that job and say, hey, I'm grateful for this, but I'm looking for something more or better, or I'm looking for my divine guidance to what is next, then we begin to shift our energy. So I love this question here by the author. Do we always get to choose what we want? Only for ourselves, not others. If your loved one in the hospital has had made a sole choice to leave the earth, your positive feeling will not keep her alive, but her death could not be in your experience if you were not a match to her energy and consciousness. So at this moment, I'm just going to share a couple of stories. And I'm going to warn you, some of these stories may sound really out of there. It took me aback a few times. But it also helped me understand this principle even deeper by being able to experience it. And I'll start off with one kind of like we just spoke about, where a young lady I worked with in another company, had been suffering from back pain. And we knew from her attitude, the pain she was in, she allowed that pain to kind of come out in her attitude and how she worked with people. She was a great lady, when she was in a great mood, she was the sweetest thing. But when she was in pain, she let you know. And with that being said, that went on for about 2 years that I knew her and I had worked with her. One night we got word that she was admitted to the hospital because the pain had gotten so bad. When she went to the hospital and they did whatever testing they did, they notified her that the pain she was feeling were from tumors that had grown on her spine, and she was at stage 4 cancer. So I want you to put yourself in that situation. If you were in the hospital right now and received that news, especially hearing the diagnosis of what you thought was normal back pain to being stage 4 cancer, where would your mind go? Well, in her case, the very next morning, I received word that she passed. And the immediate thought, the immediate consciousness that came to me was, when she heard the news, she gave up. Because I had to think to myself, over 2 years of this severe back pain, cancer was never brought up. She dealt with it, she took pills, whatever, and just kept moving. But it wasn't until she got the news of what it actually was that she made a soul choice, as they say, to leave this earth. Because, and again, I'm not in her mind, but I can only speculate that in her mind, since stage 4 cancer is usually never curable, that she figured, let me leave now. And again, she left some children and her husband behind. Second story I'll share with you, again, sounds really out there, and this one was more personal. And I got permission from my wife to use this story a long time ago, so hopefully that permission carried forward. But when her mother was dying in the hospital, she had gone into a coma. and they didn't know what to do. She wasn't coming out of the coma. She wasn't doing anything. And I remember I was driving into work and I heard an author that I like, Randy Gage, talk about angels, letters to angels. And basically, what it was that you were writing a letter to the higher consciousness or to the guardian angel of a certain person, and that letter and the energy for which you put out reaches that higher consciousness, and they intercede in speaking to that person. So again, as I always say, I can't confirm nor deny whether all of this is how it happened. I can just tell you what happened. But I also made myself clear that I will always remain open, because I believe every channel and every path brings us all to the same place. Well, that afternoon I was at work and I decided to give it a try. So I looked up how to do it, and basically I wrote a letter. And in the letter, and it was a quick gist of it, I wrote, you know, at this time your daughters are mourning and they're suffering. If it is your choice to leave this earth, then please do so, so that your daughters may mourn and you may be in peace. If it is not your choice at this moment to let go, then come back so that you can be with your daughter at least for a short time before you make that choice to move on. And I addressed it to her, their guardian angel. And then I was told to fold it, put it into the Bible at whatever verse I liked. Literally 24 hours later, she woke from her coma, and her daughters got a chance to spend some time with her before she went back into her coma and decided to leave this earth. Again, I can't explain it. I can only tell you the steps I took and how it works. But learning from what we have, I put a vibrational intention out there, and obviously her vibrations met mine, and something happened. And we were grateful for the time that she had with her daughters before she finally transitioned. So there's a lot of stories out there like that. I've talked about how in affirmative prayer, I went from unemployed one day to being hired the very next. And it's always that same thing. We talk about children when they come into this earth. They don't walk around going, can I please, and settling. Kids will always continue to beg and plead because they feel it is their directions to have it. Their thought pattern is that if I put it out there, I'm getting it. It isn't as adults, we lose that and we keep teaching them this, that we do the best we can, but in time we influence them to have doubts of their own divinity and their own way of creation. And one of the things that I love to talk about, we talk about this a lot in my talks, is that people don't want to acknowledge that they are creators of their lives, because that means they have to take responsibility. Which means if something's not going right in their life right now, it is 9 times out of 10 their thinking, their actions, or whatever it is that's affecting what it's going on in their life. One of my mentors used to always say, what you see in your life right now is a reflection of what you did 5 years ago. And what you do now will affect you 5 years from now. So this is where our choice pattern comes in. So we just talked about the universe perfectly mirrors consciousness, and it answers our deepest desires. This is probably the most comforting part of the law of attraction. Many people don't trust themselves to create their own lives. They are concerned with that ego will dominate, or their stinking thinking, as I just said, will lead them astray. Certainly this can happen temporarily, but remember, the universe is responding to vibration and energy doesn't lie. And we remember that the same concept helps answer why we sometimes think we're not getting what we want. For instance, you may say you want to be married, but if deep down inside your fear of getting hurt, a mate won't show up. The universe resonates with your deeper desire to stay alone and safe from heartbreak. You may say you want riches, but if deep down you feel unworthy or resent the wealthy, money won't materialize. And it's funny because I do have a story of that one. I remember a gentleman was talking about that. And Randy Gage always taught that we tend to put down people who have what we want because it's easier to find fault in them than it is to listen to them. And I remember this gentleman, and it was on one of the social media platforms. He was talking about how there's no reason for a billionaire to have all the money he has. And he kept putting him down, putting him down, putting him down. They finally said, if I had that money, I would end world hunger. Well, here's the thing. In that statement alone, there's a part of him that says, I wish I had that money. But if I keep putting it down, now wouldn't it be a beautiful thing if that person went out, found how to become a billionaire, got the money, and started working on world hunger? You know, a lot of people used to teach me when I used to go through prosperity classes that, wanting $1 million isn't always about just being a millionaire. It's about what you can do with the money. And there are people that I can give $1 million to and they will hoard it and whatever. And there are people I can give $1 million to who will give it away because, as Jim Rohn says, the mentality of making that million is more important than having that million, because once you give it away, you'll be able to make it tenfold. And that's a whole other lesson on giving and receiving. Okay? Utilizing principle 3, your best bet is to go ahead and feel as happy and fulfilled as if you were madly in love or wildly rich, so happy that you won't care whether it really happens or not. That's what it likely happens, because you are the match of consciousness and vibration. And I've talked about this a lot. There's that statement that says, fake it till you make it. I have hated it because of the word fake. When I hear the word fake, I automatically think I'm an imposter. That brings on imposter syndrome. But if I say act as if I have all the money in the world, act as if I have all the perfect love and relationships in the world, then that will continue to be who I am and what I receive. Now, it may not come in as a flood tomorrow. It may take time, and you're being patient about it. That's what about walking in faith is. But your outlook, your vibrational match, everything about you, the energy about you becomes different. You start attracting people into your life to help you fulfill that because of that vibration. So that's where your thought creates your world. It's certainly true that you have a choice about how to react to events, lives. Practicing that alone is a huge step in spiritual growth. We talk about having that choice of perspective. What is your perspective in the matter? You have the choice to either perspective build you or a perspective tear you down. Which is the one that you choose today to do? When we talk about, one of the things that comes up when we talk about thought is God's will. Back to principle 1 and 2, we are never separated from God because we are expressions of the divine. God is not an old man watching from a distance and sending challenges to test us. Spirit is a force of love and creative energy expressing through us and as us. And when we understand that, it is the source. Now, you can, like I said, some people may have an aversion to the word God. I went through some things, too, that I myself had pushed away from the Bible and everything else. And coming to Unity, I've learned a whole new perspective. There's that word perspective again, to allow to see things in a different light. But when we understand that that's divine intuition, that can be superlative intuition that's coming through, we have those choices to make. Emily Cady wrote the book Lessons in Truth. Remember, this desire in the heart for anything is God's sure promise sent back beforehand to indicate that it's already yours in the limitless realm of supply, and whatever you want, you can have for the taking. I used to joke, because I used to hear people say this all the time. I would pray, and I would get an idea, and then I would think about the idea, and then I didn't think it would work for me. So let's take it as if God was a man in the sky and he was sending you checks in the mail. But the checks came at the same time as the bill. But because the envelope didn't look like you wanted it to, you kept throwing them away like bills. Well, isn't that the same as when you get those intuitive motions that you are pushing away your abundance? You're pushing away your ability to begin to find that creative part of you. So this brings us to principle number 4, because now we're saying, well, wait a minute, we're the ones that think the thought, that think the things that think the thoughts that do the things that make the things. It's a whole rhyme. I can't remember it right now. I heard it on Christ Universal Temple. But basically, we are the ones who think the thought that makes the thing. That's it. Got it. All right. Then why should we pray? Because principle number 4 says prayer is a creative thinking that heightens the connection with God mind and therefore brings forth wisdom, healing, prosperity, and everything good. So again, we know that in the Gospels we hear, so I tell you, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it and it will be yours. One thing I like to remind people is if when you listen to the stories, or even if you watch it, a movie based on the Christian scriptures, the one thing you always notice is that Jesus would give thanks for the miracle before the miracle happened. So that's where the principle is. We already know it's there. So what is prayer? Well, let's talk about the first 3 principles. God is all there is, everywhere in absolute good. The transcendent God is not an old man watching from the clouds, showering us with blessings or discipline when the mood strikes, but is a field of intelligence, love, and creative energy in which we live. We can never be separated from the divine presence. Now, principle 2, we are expressions of God like waves of an ocean. We are the divine at the core. The immanent or personal God is within us. We create our own experience when we focus on something and consciously or not draw it forth from a field of limitless possibilities or God mind. In this sense, we are co-creators with God. So knowing that we're there, so what is it that prayer would do? Well, many of us know the term law of attraction and know that their thoughts manifest into life. Cling to the idea of God as daddy who has taken care of them. They believe that they can petition God for favors, behave well enough to deserve blessings, and be protected from the hardships of life. This belief often rationalizes life's apparent vagaries as a test of faith sent by God to build our character. God won't give us more than you can handle, is the assurance to others. This is the character of God that turns questioners into atheists, a God that doesn't make sense. And I remember, and I think I talked about this in our last talk, about a minister who used to hate telling people that she was a minister because she knew where their conversation would go. And that's exactly it. When you have a preconceived notion of what God is, and you don't evolve that thought pattern, because you know what? I was right there with you. I was a Catholic boy, and for me, God was up in the sky looking to punish me when I wasn't doing well. I had to act a certain way, speak a certain way for me to be rewarded. And it took years into my teens to finally start questioning and start moving into the direction I was going. So as the author puts here, after my ideas about God began to change, my attempt at prayer only distressed me. My spiritual friends assured me that all my answers I sought were within. Bad news, I felt mostly emptiness. And I understand that the power within was more than my personality. I still mistook my ego self for myself in its entirety and believed my conscious thoughts were the only source of my answers. And I wanted to get rid of it because I felt that way. When I'm going through affirmations and I'm going through denials and I'm doing my prayers, a lot of times my prayers would try to revert to that embedded theology of what I learned as a Catholic student, as I learned as a practicing practitioner, or as I hear from people around me who are still in the traditional sense of the word, that prayer was about asking and beseeching and begging for something and hoping it happened. So prayer is the time we take to focus to align ourselves in oneness with the divine and affirm that whatever we need is already ours. This is affirmative prayer. Jesus taught us to pray in utter confidence. Your Father knows what you need before you ask him. And whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you've already received it and it will be yours. Even the vibrations that we put out there between the words dear God and amen can make a difference in our lives. Is it affirmative telling or commanding what we want? In fact, during Bible interpretation, I really learned that the word ask really meant to command or to demand something. So when we go into prayer or our own prayers go unanswered, it's not a decision by God. It's only one of two things. We're either attracting from an unconscious, deeper desire, or we are blocking the answer we want. From a subconscious level, we have to learn why we do affirmations is because we want to change that subconscious. Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman used to say that when we talk about the heart, going into our heart space, we're talking about our subconscious mind. We're talking about changing that programming, that filter. You were with me a couple of Mondays ago for Meditation Monday, where I showed how pouring, different colors of dye into the water, but then pouring pure truth in starts to clear it. It's the same thing. We want to do that. If you ever heard of the practice of Ho'oponopono, it is believed that everything comes from divine mind into our subconscious mind. But when it gets filtered through there is where it changes. Our intention may be to help something, help someone, help that, but it comes out expressed as something that somebody might label as negative or dangerous. But it started off as a wonderful thought. So what happened? It is the programming that's within our subconscious. So you're either blocking the answer we want, or you're attracting it from the unconscious deeper desire. Ho'oponopono has a 4-step stage where we say, I love you. Please forgive me. Thank you. And there's another saying, and I do apologize, but it is those things because we want to clear that thought. We believe that those thoughts, when we can see what's going on in the world, when we see evil, it's something that's programmed into us from something that believe. And it's the same way as we may see atrocities in the world, and somebody else may not, because their subconscious was programmed that atrocity is actually a good thing. So that's when we say situations are never good or bad. It's just a situation because it's based on the perspective of who is watching and who is seeing it. So Deepak Chopra, in his book, The Third Jesus, said, at a deeper level, everything is unified and whole. When you ask for anything, the one is asking the one. God is asking God, and there's always a response. In this case, response doesn't mean yes or no from God. There is no judge deciding whether you're worthy or not. Those perceptions are born of separation. When Jesus told his followers that God seeks and knows everything, he was describing the complete intimacy between self and the intelligence that pervades the universe. Since you cannot exist without being part of that intelligence, praying to God is circular, a feedback loop. No matter what's happening in the moment, look past the appearance and speak only about what you want. So again, we talked about this a minute ago. The Greek and Hebrew words that are translated ask into the Christian Bible connotes demand or claim. So when we know the part of the Lord's Prayer, give us this day our daily bread, assumes that our wish will be granted, just as we say, please pass the salt, with no doubt that the salt will be handed over. Prayer is not supplication or begging, but a simple asking for that which we know is waiting for us in the hands of our Father, and an affirmation of its existence. And this is from Charles Fillmore. The most effective prayer of all might be wordless, a period of silence to align ourselves with all that is and return to the wholeness that is our nature. The Buddhists call it samadhi, a place of perfect stillness to make room for inspiration. The Tao Ching says, bide in silence and the radiance of spirit shall come in and make its home. Here's one of those quick moments. I'll just put a little note in there. When I say we are all saying the same thing. Ta-da. So with that being said, affirmative prayer is not the hope that things will get better, but the certainty that there already are better. God is already here. Good is already here. We look past appearances, ignore outer circumstances, and affirm truth of God in every situation. So let's look at a quick example of traditional or typical prayer. So typical prayer, dear God, please make my friend well. He's having surgery tomorrow. Please make sure the doctors don't make any mistakes. There's no complications. Please let him recover quickly and get back to work so he can take care of his family, be with his wife because she's already worried. Amen. Another traditional prayer could be something like, let us pray for all who suffer and who are afflicted in the body or in the mind, for the hungry and the homeless, the destitute and the oppressed, for the sick, the wounded, and the crippled, for those in loneliness, fear, and anguish, for those who face temptation, doubt, despair, for the sorrowful and the bereaved, for the prisoners and the captives, and for those in the mortal danger, that God in his mercy will comfort and relieve them and grant them all the knowledge of life and stir it up in us as well. So those are typically the way, I was taught to pray as a child. Affirmative prayer now says, the healing power of the divine flows through my body. I am healthy, I am whole, I am healed. The healing power of God works through the doctors and nurses and medication. I am restored to my natural state of health. I am grateful for my healthy body and for the gifts of this experience. Now, even if you're still wondering the differences of the two, just feel how it felt in your body. One of the things my mentors used to always say is 1 ounce of doubt, you're out. So if anywhere in your prayer you're doubting that it will be answered, you're right. But if you're commanding it, you're saying it, the healing power of the divine flows through my body. I am healthy, I am wholeness, I am healed. And believe that, then you know that it will begin to happen. We talk about surrendering is living from the higher self. It's moving from ego to soul, expressing as Christ rather than the flawed, frightened personality that is dominant for most of us. Surrender to God is not abdication, throwing up our hands and saying, you take over. It is instead being God. It is living as Jesus did, from the inner well of compassion and equanimity, that can carry us through the most difficult challenges. And yes, we will have challenges. We talked about crucifixion. We talked about chemicalization. Those things that challenge our mind because our ego or our self-identity wants to keep us safe, or at least what it perceives it's safe, and doesn't allow us to move forward. And we have to rise in consciousness above that to know that even though these challenges are there, that we can move forward. And you'll notice that each time you do it becomes easier because you can recognize the crucifixion. You can recognize the chemicalization and move forward with that. So now that we know that prayer is to change our own minds, why do we pray for others? Well, prayer is the energy of thoughts and feelings, and that energy can be directed towards specific outcomes. It can bolster the intention of people who are praying for. For instance, if a friend in the hospital has an intention to recover, we can add our energy to the process. As a Reiki master teacher now, one of the things that I always tell people is that when we do Reiki, we're just adding to the energy. We're helping to your natural body's ability to help itself. We're just adding and becoming conduits of this energy to make it stronger and to help you regain further. I've had people come to me with headaches, and I'll do Reiki on their head, and they're like, it's gone. Well, I didn't do anything other than to add Reiki energy to your body and assist in its own healing power. We've done Reiki circles where people are like, wow, I couldn't even move my knee a minute ago. All we did was add to it. It's the same thing that prayer is doing. We're adding to that energy that helps. One of the best prayer books that I've read is The Universe is Calling by Eric Butterworth, and he describes it this way. When you worry about the loved one, the child on the way home from school, the wayward youth who has run off to some commune, the husband with the alcohol problem, the friend in the hospital, you're putting the full weight of your consciousness on the side of their difficulty. You must heal your concern. You must let go and release your loved ones into God's care and keeping. The work will be done is in you and your consciousness, not the other person. An alternative might be to ask for prayer for someone less emotionally involved in the situation. In fact, the less details that is offered, the easier it is for the person praying to focus on the highest and best outcome without forming an opinion of what is needed. Spirit intends you to be radiating center, which draws you to wherever you need to be, well, strong and successful and prosperous. So there's a lot there, and we know what thoughts bringing into our life are, and we know what prayer is now. And the point is to put those into practice. So again, the first two principles were mind, divine mind, God mind, whatever you want to call it, source, universe. 2 is the idea. Everything begins an idea. This is where the thought pattern comes in. This is where prayer comes in, to be aligned with source so that we can allow divine order, which is mind, idea, and And next week, we'll talk about principle number 5, which is where we put everything into action or expression. So with that, I don't want to keep you too much longer. And if you are interested in anything I've read, you can just pick up the 5 Principles by Reverend Ellen Davenport. Great book, a lot more detail. Trust me, there's so much more in this book. But again, we want to keep it short, keep it highlighted, keep you interested so that you can search and find your own answers. So with that, if no one else has told you I love you, there's nothing you can do about it. And I will see you in the next episode.